All right, so today we're diving deep into Either Or, by Søren Kierkegaard.
Oh, yeah.
And this book's kind of puzzle, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, we've got these papers, right, supposedly just found in some old desk.
Hmm.
And they lay out these two totally different ways of approaching life.
Yeah, the aesthetic and the ethical.
Right. And as if that wasn't enough,
Huh?
Kierkegaard throws in these pseudonymous authors A and B.
Like he's playing a game with us.
He is. It's like, who are these voices, really? And whose desk were these papers in?
Right. So many questions.
But okay, let's start with A. This guy's the champion of the aesthetic life.
Living for pleasure, beauty, all that.
Exactly. And I gotta admit, I find his voice so captivating.
Oh, yeah.
He's witty, cynical, a little bit dark even.
Yeah, well, that comes through right away in the Diapsalmata, the opening section, It's these short aphoristic reflections.
Right.
And they give us a glimpse into A's mind.
Like how he sees the world.
Yeah. There's this restless searching for meaning and pleasure.
But in a world that just feels empty.
Exactly.
It's that rotation of crops idea that really got me.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
This constant need for new experiences, new relationships, new emotions.
It's to avoid boredom.
Because like he thinks if he just keeps things moving, keeps it fresh, he can somehow outrun that emptiness. Do you think that's a strategy that could work?
Well, I think Kierkegaard's being deliberate here.
You do?
Yeah. He's giving us a character who embodies a certain worldview.
So A is like a case study.
In a way, yeah.
Interesting.
This aesthetic life that A is living, it's all about maximizing pleasure, avoiding pain.
In the moment, right.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Diapsalmata also kind of hints at the limits of this.
Like it can't last.
Exactly. There's a sense of despair underneath it all.
Like a void.
Yeah, a recognition that even if you fill your life with beauty and excitement, it can still feel empty.
That's deep.
Kierkegaard gets you thinking.
He does, and that brings us to one of the most famous parts of Either Or.
You talking about the seducer's diary?
Yeah. This is where A really puts his philosophy into practice.
He does, doesn't he?
I mean, this diary takes us right inside the mind of a master manipulator.
Wow.
We see how A carefully plans every little encounter with his target.
Cordelia.
Cordelia, right. He uses his charm, his wit, even his understanding of psychology just to seduce her.
Like it's all a game to him.
It is. And he's so deliberate about it. Every letter, every glance, every word is chosen to get a specific reaction from her.
It's almost theatrical, isn't it?
Totally. So what do you think Kierkegaard's trying to say about love and relationships with this character?
Well, I don't think it's just about judging him. Like is he right or wrong? It's a deeper question, I think. Can we really connect with another person if we're always treating relationships like a means to an end?
And for A, the end is.
Conquest, the thrill of the chase.
But then what? What happens once he's won her over?
Right. Is there anything real left?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. Like Kierkegaard knew we'd need a breather.
Yeah. From all that aesthetic intensity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where B comes in.
Right. This guy is all about the ethical life.
The total opposite of A.
It feels like he's stepping in and saying, wait a minute, there's a whole other way to live.
He does, doesn't he? B directly challenges that idea that a life of pleasure can ever really satisfy you.
It's more than a critique, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like a whole other philosophy, a different way of being in the world.
Exactly.
B puts so much emphasis on responsibility, commitment, self-awareness.
All those things A seem to kind of gloss over.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah.
And B argues that by making choices and taking responsibility for them.
Owning them, yeah.
Yeah, and committing to something bigger than ourselves.
Like a cause or a community.
We move beyond that, the fleeting and the superficial.
We find real meaning.
And B uses the example of marriage to make this point.
That's a big one.
It is. He sees it as this profound ethical commitment.
Not just a romantic thing.
Right. It's about facing your limitations and striving for something greater together.
I love how he contrasts this with the seducer's view of relationships.
Oh, yeah. It's so different.
For A, it's all about conquest and self-gratification.
That for B.
Marriage is about building a life together.
Through good times and bad.
And finding meaning in that shared journey.
It makes you wonder if A ever experiences that kind of depth.
Right. It's like he's always on the surface, never diving in.
Okay, so we've got these contrasting views of love and relationships.
Yeah, representing these bigger differences between the aesthetic and the ethical.
Right, but then Kierkegaard throws in this whole other section.
And the unhappiest one.
Oh man, that one really got to me.
Me too.
He asks us to think about who's truly the unhappiest person.
Right. Is it someone who's gone through incredible loss and suffering?
Or is it someone who was never even born?
Whoa.
It makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about happiness and suffering.
It does. We usually think pain and loss are the worst things, right?
Yeah. But Kierkegaard suggests that maybe there's this deeper unhappiness.
Like an empty...
A void. Yeah, that comes from never having existed at all.
Wow.
And then he gives us this image of a grave.
With the inscription, the unhappiest one?
Right. But when they dig it up...
It's empty.
Chills.
I know, right? What do you make of that?
Honestly?
I'm not sure.
Me neither. It's one of those details that sticks with you.
Like
it could mean so many things.
Maybe it's about how we can't really pin down suffering.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, or maybe it suggests that we can transcend it somehow.
Like find meaning even in the face of pain and loss.
That's the hope, isn't it?
It is. Kierkegaard definitely doesn't give us any easy answers.
Nope.
But that's part of his brilliance.
Totally.
He pushes us to grapple with these huge questions, you know?
The big existential dilemmas.
And to come to our own conclusions.
It's not about finding the right answer. It's about the journey, the process of thinking deeply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's really something how Kierkegaard uses these pseudonyms.
Yeah.
And this whole indirect way of communicating.
But he's not going to spoon feed us the answers.
Right. It's more like he's inviting us into this this game.
A game.
Yeah, like an intellectual puzzle where we got to piece together the different viewpoints.
And come to our own conclusion.
Exactly.
So what's the effect of this approach, do you think?
Well, I think it's super effective.
You do?
Yeah, because he's laying out these contrasting ideas.
But without saying which one is right.
Exactly. So we're forced to confront the material, you know.
On our own terms.
Yeah, we can't just passively read it.
We have to actually engage with it.
Weigh the arguments, figure out what we believe.
It's almost like a more ethical way of writing, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Like he's respecting the reader's intelligence.
Yeah, and our autonomy.
He's not telling us what to think.
He's giving us the tools to think for ourselves.
And that's part of why Kierkegaard is still so relevant today, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was wrestling with these questions that we're still dealing with.
Choice, freedom, responsibility.
Finding meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
All the big stuff.
It's amazing how much his ideas about anxiety resonate with us now.
Right.
Like, think about it. We're bombarded with choices constantly.
So many options. So many possibilities.
It can be overwhelming.
Totally. And Kierkegaard saw that, you know, back then.
He did.
Yeah, he understood that the modern individual was facing this kind of existential paralysis.
Like being frozen by too many choices.
Exactly. Like being lost in a sea of possibilities.
And what did he offer? A way out.
He did, but not through easy answers.
Oh, no.
It's through self-examination, you know, facing our fears, our anxieties,
and then
choosing to live authentically.
So where does all this leave us?
Well, we've gone through the aesthetic life with A.
Right.
The ethical life with B.
And then this whole unhappiest one thing.
Yeah.
What's the takeaway? What's either or really trying to tell us?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
I think if you look at the whole thing,
Yeah.
the real challenge isn't picking one way of life. Exactly. It's not about being all aesthetic or all ethical. It's about recognizing that we have both of these impulses inside us.
Oh, that's interesting.
And finding a way to integrate them.
Make them work together.
Yeah, to create a meaningful life.
So maybe it's not either.
Maybe it's both hand.
I like that.
Right, finding that balance.
Between pleasure and responsibility.
Exactly. And that balance might look different for everyone.
It's personal.
Very personal. It's a lifelong journey.
Of self-discovery.
And growth.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
Kierkegaard asks us to imagine choosing between these two lives. One filled with fleeting pleasures.
The synthetic life.
Right. And the other filled with deep ethical engagement.
The ethical life.
If you had to choose right now, which path would you take?
That's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
And what does that choice tell you about yourself?
About your values, your priorities.
I think that's a question worth sitting with for a while.
I agree. It might even keep challenging us long after we finish reading either or.
And if this deep dive has inspired you to explore more,
make sure to check out the show notes.
We've got links to the full text of Either Or.
And some great analysis and resources.
There's a whole world of Kierkegaard out there just waiting to be discovered.
So go explore.
Happy reading, everyone.